All right, today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to be detectives. We're traveling back about 1,500 years to crack a fascinating legal mystery right from the pages of the Talmud. And this one's got everything: a public takedown, a secret teaching, and a legal twist you won't see coming. So here's where it all kicks off. You've got a student, and he's reciting what seems like a pretty standard law about cooking on the Sabbath. But then, out of nowhere, the great sage Rav does something pretty shocking. He silences him, just shuts him down right there, in front of everyone. And that's the big question, right? Why? This wasn't just a teacher correcting a student. This was a public statement, and it had to mean something. What on earth could the student have said that was so wrong it deserved that kind of reaction? Well, let's start digging. We're going to approach this just like the Talmudic sages themselves would. We're going to look at the evidence, piece by piece, and try to reconstruct what really happened that day. So, let's paint the picture. You have a tanna. Think of him as a living, breathing legal library. His job is to memorize and recite these ancient teachings perfectly. And he's standing before his master, Rav, who is one of the absolute giants of his time. The student starts reciting a law, and Rav just cuts him off. So we start our investigation, but right away we hit a complication. It turns out our main person of interest, Rav, isn't as straightforward as he seems. This is definitely not a simple case of a teacher correcting a student. Okay, so the first thing you'd probably think is, well, this is just a classic legal argument. I mean, in the world of the Talmud, you had different schools of thought, and they disagreed on pretty much everything. It's a natural first theory. And on this particular topic, you've got two main camps. You have Rabbi Meir's school, which is a bit more lenient. They say, look, if you cooked on Shabbat by accident, you can still eat the food. Then you have Rabbi Yehuda's school, which is much stricter. They say, nope, forbidden. The student, it seems, was quoting the lenient view of Rabbi Meir. So, theory number one is pretty straightforward. Rav shut the student down because he just flat out disagreed. Rav must follow the stricter opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Simple, right? Case closed. Well, not so fast. See, this is where that first theory just completely falls apart. It turns out Rav has two different ways of teaching. Behind closed doors with his top students, he actually teaches the lenient opinion of Rabbi Meir. But when he's speaking in public to a general audience, he teaches the strict opinion because he doesn't want people getting careless about Shabbat. So him silencing a student for quoting Rabbi Meir, it just doesn't add up. Something else has to be going on here. And this is where the Talmudic detectives pull a classic move. They suggest a totally new theory, a pivot that just changes everything we thought we knew about the case. Okay, get ready for the big twist. Another sage, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzhak, steps into the conversation and basically says, hold on everybody, you've got the crime all wrong. He suggests that maybe, just maybe, the student wasn't talking about cooking at all. Maybe he was reciting a law about slaughtering an animal on Shabbat, a totally different kind of forbidden act. It turns out, for Rav, the problem wasn't the action itself. It didn't matter if it was cooking or slaughtering. The real issue, the clue that unlocks this whole thing, was the status of the object, the vegetables or the animal, before Shabbat even started. And this brings us to the core legal idea that just cracks the whole case wide open. It's a really brilliant principle with a name that tells you everything you need to know. It's called the fit-to-chew principle, and the idea is this. If something was already edible in its raw state when Shabbat began, your mind has already classified it as food. But if it wasn't edible raw, then it's considered set aside from being used on Shabbat, a concept called muktzah. It's basically off-limits. And here's how that plays out. Take a raw vegetable. You can eat that, right? It's fit to chew. So Rabbi Meir would say, if you accidentally cooked it, fine, you can eat it. But a live animal, you can't just go and chew on a live animal. It's not considered meat yet. It's not fit to chew. So it was mentally set aside when Shabbat began. And that's it. That's the solution. The student made a huge mistake. He was reciting the law for slaughtering, but he was using the logic that only applies to cooking. He completely missed the crucial distinction of the fit-to-chew principle. Rav silenced him for that fundamental sloppy error. But you know, the Talmud never just stops when the mystery is solved. That's when the fun begins. Now, they're going to stress test this principle. They're going to push it to its absolute limits to see if it holds up. So what about an exception? what if the forbidden act wasn't just a mistake, but it was done to save a life? I mean, Jewish law is very clear that you can violate Shabbat to save someone's life. Does that change the status of the item? You bet it does. The Talmud argues that if you knew you had a sick person in the house before Shabbat began, your whole mindset changes. In your head, that live animal is no longer just an animal. It's potential medicine. It's potential life-saving food. You've mentally designated it for use, and because of that, it was not considered set aside. Okay, now for a counterexample, a real curveball to prove how consistent this rule is. Rav Papa brings up this tricky case involving a gourd. Think about it. A gourd is a vegetable. It's absolutely fit to chew when it's raw, so it should be fine. But what if that gourd was still attached to the vine on the ground when Shabbat started? Well, you couldn't use it because harvesting is forbidden. Its location made it inaccessible. In other words, it was set aside. So even if you later cooked it for that sick person, its original set-aside status still stands. So after all of these twists and turns and hypotheticals, where do we land? What's the final practical ruling? And maybe more importantly, what can we actually learn from this whole deep dive? So here's the final verdict laid out by Rabbi Meir. It's incredibly nuanced. If you slaughter an animal on Shabbat for a sick person, a healthy person can eat the raw meat. Why? Because you can't just slaughter one little piece of an animal. The whole thing becomes permitted by necessity. But if you cook food for a sick person, a healthy person cannot eat it. And that's a protective decree to stop you from being tempted to just say, while I'm at it, I'll just cook a bigger pot for everyone. And so our 1,500-year-old cold case is solved. But what started out as a story about a student being silenced turned into this incredible masterclass in logic and understanding intent and in precise categorization. It shows a way of thinking that demands you look past the surface of an action and see the principles and the status underneath. So the real question for us is, in our world of hot takes and snap judgments, what can we learn from this ancient, patient, methodical pursuit of getting things exactly right?